Goodbye, old friend. Must be on my way. Sun is rising to brighten up the day. Road is waiting to carry me back home. Higher and higher, back up where I belong. 'Cause the mountains keep calling, my heart's up in those hills, and the mountains keep calling me still, calling me still.
If the world was a mule, Parrott would be the tail. And I don't mean that in a bad way. I mean location-wise, it's always seemed to me like it was on the tail end of everything. When you go down there, you got to turn around and come back out. You can't go. I couldn't believe it, but when somebody told me they had been down there and, been across through Parrott, I said, well, you must have went by train because when you go by road, you turn around and come back out.
Well, the earliest memories is just a neighborhood, just a plain country neighborhood, just a lot of 6 or 8 or 10 families lived in it. And the mines opened up, and that brought in a lot of strangers and a lot of different type of people. You got a lot of riffraff and a lot of other stuff, too.
Well, Parrott one time was a thriving town, especially when all the mines was operating and all the company houses and things that was there. There was a lot of people at Parrott one time.
I had a real good life growing up. I enjoyed it. Yeah, we'd go out at maybe back then and build a fire and have a wiener roast or marshmallow roast or sit around the fire and talk, when we was kids. We did a lot of that.
We would swim and fish and hunt and ride your bicycle, date, and do anything that you could get away with.
When we was little, we played Ring Around the Rosie and drop the handkerchiefs and stuff like that. And then as we got older, we went to where you do a lot of running and catching each other and trying to. But then we played a lot of baseball, too. We played along with the boys. I had a lot of brothers, so I could play baseball about as good as they could. And I loved it.
We'd get out and play, go out to the schoolyard and play. But at home, I remember we made our balls out of socks. We'd put a rock in and stuff it with grass and then put it down in a sock and tie it up. And that's what we played with. If you lost a rubber ball, that's what you played with. We had some good times. Daddy built us a playhouse in the smokehouse, put a stove out there, and we was allowed to be children.
Now my daddy was a good dancer. He was. He loved to go to dances. Him and my stepmother, they went to dances all the time. And he used to have dances at people's houses.
There's quite a few people that played musical instruments in too. Fiddles, guitars, and banjos, and so on. But more than they do nowadays.
Cricket played that was Jock's sister. She'd play the guitar, and there was Wayne Mustard out there, played the piano, and we'd sing. We'd had some good times. I always had a group on the porch down here then. I always had time to visit, not like it is now. Nobody has time for anything, but we always got together, and I remember all of us walking down off of the mountain to go to church. We had a lot of fun.
My parents always went to church every Sunday morning, Sunday night, Wednesday night. There was revivals, and if it was revivals, all of the children had to go to church. I mean, this was something that we had to do. No choice. But we looked forward to it because we'd see other young people, and it's kind of a meeting place for everybody in the community.
Everybody just met and talked or laughed, played music, sang, did anything like that. Nobody had cars. The kids that we dated or would, they would still have to come to the house to see us or walk to church. We didn't do anything, go anywhere or anything. Maybe go to the store and somebody would walk home with us or something like that. Sundays, we'd meet at the Bell Spring Church, Presbyterian Church, and sit on the steps and watch cars go by. Big deal. But it was, that was something different.
It was really a good time. It wasn't bad. Kids nowadays, they couldn't cope with that, I don't believe. When I was growing up during the Depression, you didn't have the money to buy stuff like they do nowadays. You had to do with what you get, and was happy to get it.
Back in those days, $1 would go further than $10 will today. I know my husband, he'd work in the fields, and for $1 a day, on Saturday, to have $6, we'd go to town, buy a week's supply of groceries. We'd get a bag of flour and a bag of meal, coffee and sugar and everything we needed. Then there'd probably be enough left for a pair of shoes for someone. And that's the way the money was spent. It never was wasted.
I think work was slack, and a lot of people were not able to eat or have food or anything. And during the times that the mines would be closed, Dad would walk out to farm and work all day for the food that he could bring home. He always tried to supply us food with something to eat: potatoes, cabbages, corn. I can remember these things, him bringing in the big, what do they call them, hemp sacks or something, grass sacks of groceries. And then some of the neighbors would come out and want to help Mom cook it, help eat it, borrow, in other words.
You couldn't buy a job. My husband walked till he walked the soles off his shoes, and every morning he'd get up and get him a newspaper and put a whole lot of, cut it out, put it in the sole of his shoe.
I drove a cow for other people. I got 50 cents a month to drive a cow round trip 2 miles. I got 50 cents a month to do that every day. A month.
They pulled together and come through it. If you needed help, your next door neighbors right there help you. They'd help you right through it. Everybody helped each other in those days, and I think that's the best part to come out of the Depression, was the way people helped each other.
There was a man who owned a little grocery store, and it had not been for him, I don't know what we would have done when we were during that time. Was he would let us go and buy groceries for a whole month and then pay for them at the end of the month.
People had a lot in common back in that day. They'd help one another, but they won't today.
went into the coal company, they couldn't existed at all.
The coal sales would slack off during the hot months and pick up during the winter months.
They would work 6 months in the wintertime. In the summertime, they'd be off all summer long. They wouldn't work in the mines all summer long. You go back and work September. In September, they go back to work. And they just have to work at different things, other jobs, you know.
You had to work somewhere, and that was nothing else. Around here about that time, there's nothing else to do. Very little railroad work. But it was hard work, brother. It was back-breaking. And I remember one man, his name Jim Miller. I won't tell you what he used to call me, but if he had something good to eat, like cake or pie, anything, when he'd go to get him a drink of water, he'd eat that first. And I asked him, I said, what in the world you mean eat that first? And he could let up a road and said, because I might kill and not get it. He didn't want to lose that. Now that's how dangerous it was in them mines.
The miners was awful hard work. Of course, it's better pay than farmers and all that, but it's so much more dangerous. You was risking your life every time you went in there, and it's bad for everybody. As your daddy's in there, and your husband and all that, you just like you send someone out nowadays. Well, we don't think about it, but you get out on the road, you're in danger. You know that, but not as dangerous as it was in the mine.
When I first went in the mines, I had a brother that was a motorman, and I went in to train with my brother. And of course, there was no smoking and no matches and no fires and all of this. And so we went down the first time to take the motor off the charge, which was on battery charged motors. And the sparks and the arc was flying everywhere. I was scared to death. We rode a trip, what they called a trip going in the mines. Cars, and they put you in the cars and you sit in the bottom of the car, and there was a lot of places going down where they'd cut through rock headings. It was very close to the top of the car, and you had to be very careful and keep your head down to keep from getting caught between the car and the top of the mines. I had a lot of second thoughts. That's why I didn't stay too long.
My dad worked there, and I had a brother that worked there, and I thought it was the thing to do. If I know what I know now, I would have never went back the second day.
What do you know now?
That it ain't nothing but hard labor. The hardest. Well, it's the darkest place I ever been when you cut your light out, and it's dusty. And if I'd have known the way back out, I'd have never gone back again.
Scared me to death, that black hole, man. What you talking about? I got on a trip. We called it the trip. A string of cars, about 4, going down in the mines. This wasn't a shaft mine. It was And I've looked back out at that hole, and it was about maybe 6 foot when you start doing it. But I've seen it till it wasn't that big, until it went out, plumb out like that. I wonder now if I'll ever see that daylight anymore. A lot of people went in there never did see daylight. And is that gas and rats? Some of the biggest rats you ever seen. They get your dinner buckets, just anywhere to find something to eat. Yeah, you had to keep a lid on your dinner bucket all the time. You want to keep the dirt out too. Well, you'd be black as your ink anytime you work in a mine.
Dad dug coal, come home, black, dirty. You couldn't see anything but his eyes. Mother would fix him a tub of water in the smokehouse to take a bath before she let him come in the house. He would but he always came in the house clean. I mean, you know, but you could see him coming up the mountain carrying his toolbox and his hat with the lantern hooked on the top of it. And we'd watch for him coming up the mountain, walking after he had worked all day. It was a very hard life, I'm sure, for him.
A lot of people here worked at McCoy, went across the river, and even over to Big Vein. There's 2 mines over there. You knew that well. They worked in that. I never did work in that area.
I had some friends, just like my brothers. I worked with them, we helped each other. But the walls fell in. I was just lucky, I'm told. 12 good men digging for poor man's gold. But a man makes his way. Nothing don't pay. She's waiting there for me.
I believe that where there's 12 killed, I believe that's at Great Valley. 6 of them was over on our side and 6 on the McCoy side, I believe.
Well, it was a sad time. I helped dig one of the people's grave at Parrott. There's so many of them that they had to put some of them outside the church to have their funeral. They had 2 different explosions at Great Valley, and actually they had 3. Mr. Dawson, his son-in-law, was in one.
My husband had gone to work in August with Dad in the mines. So when the explosion happened on September the 19th, they were in there together. Lewis had not wanted to go to work that morning. I learned later that Mom didn't want Dad to go either, due to a feeling that she had that something was going to happen.
She said that she heard the awfulest larp, and it was just like somebody shoveling dirt on a grave. And she said it worried her. She couldn't, looked all over the house. And so the next morning, she said she followed Dad down to the gate, begging at him not to go in that morning.
Uncle Alfred came for me about 10 o'clock and told me that there had been an accident, he called it, at the mines, and they needed me to come up there, that they were bringing Dad and Lewis up to the hospital. So he was taking me. And when we got there before the ambulance did.
We figured they done took him to the funeral home. It was scary.
Of course, it was some time before we could see them. They were both burned badly, black, with coal dust and burns, scars, and blisters, and that sort of stuff.
And oh, that flesh smelled awful. I know my brother-in-law went over to cut his hair after that, and the odor, you could smell it from away down the hall. I remember going in and Daddy saying, "Sis, if that was hell," said, "I sure don't want to go there."
it's just as much different today as it was back there as day is night today. Oh, man, I wish I could live those days over and see some of the people that I've seen in my lifetime. I love to.
Well, it's settled back sort of into a community since the mines closed in. A lot of people have bought their homes, and especially them little old company houses, they've been bought a lot of them, fixed them up some. And then a lot of people's come in, young people's married and brought strangers in, and it's just what you might call a rural community now.
We had some real good people. We had the swimming hole. I happened to live where the swimming hole was on our land in front of the house, where the two creeks divide, and the ball diamond was there in the field. And when we grew older, the people that worked there became neighbors and friends. Everybody knew everybody else. Too much sometimes, and knew everybody else's business. But Parrott was a friendly place, a mean place, and with it, if you go there looking for trouble, you'd find it. If you go there not looking for it, you could be well accepted.
Goodbye, old friend. Must be on my way. Sun is rising to brighten up the day. Road is waiting to carry me back home. Higher and higher, back up where I belong. 'Cause the mountains keep calling, my heart's up in those hills, and the mountains keep calling me still, calling me still. Time's a wasting, the picking has begun. Leaves are turning, golden in the sun. Fall is falling, summer days are gone. Wheels are rolling now, I must be moving on. 'Cause mountains keep calling, my heart's up in those hills, and the mountains keep calling me still. Come what will, I know she's waiting, just like a lady, pretty